Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back on another video from Annie News, and today we're going to be checking out Shield Heroes Season 2, Episode 1, Cut Content. Literally just finished watching the first episode, and I feel like it'd be fun to do this every week, watch an episode of Shield Hero, and then check out the cut content from Annie News. The cut content videos from Annie News are always very good. Let's see what was left out, or changed, or rearranged, shall we?
Unlike Shield Hero to go and rearrange the events.
Ah, there we go, hey!
The way they're doing it in Season 2 is certainly a different one. Not only was a 5-chapter training arc completely skipped, the very essence of Rishia's backstory was disregarded as well.
Oh.
It's as if they just wanted to get straight to the next arc as fast as possible, leaving the rest of us confused as to how we got here and why things are happening the way they are right now. So, with the new season of Shield Hero underway, allow me to fill in those gaps with our new weekly cut content.
Cool.
Series. A spoiler-free look into everything the anime's missed from the novel so far. Episode 26, A New Roar. Covering very brief moments from the first 13 chapters of Volume 6, then continuing onward with Chapter 14 and 15. Obviously, I can't go in depth with what's essentially 3
It's mad that they've skipped like a whole training arc and a backstory.
On the key moments
Weird.
Of the chapters that were skipped. The main events which likely won't be revisited in later episodes. So, starting things off with the meeting of the heroes, the actual purpose of this was to discuss how weak they all were. You see, the fact that Lark was able to remove all 3 heroes with
he
just a single
did
attack
dispatch them quite easily, didn't he?
Normally, Naofumi wouldn't have cared too much about it, but his fight with Lark had made him realize that he needed them. Lark's ability to use what's called a defense rating attack,
they need to all
turn
work
Naofumi's naturally high defenses against him. It was a potentially fatal weakness Naofumi knew Lark would be sure to take advantage of. So, with Lark's attacks that turn Naofumi's defenses into damage, as well as Glass's attacks that bypass his defenses completely,
Damn, she was strong as well,
clear
Jesus.
that a previously weakened fight had now shifted tides into the enemy's favor. Thus, the reason why the 4 heroes were having this meeting now. They were discussing the ways in which they could become more powerful. Of course, Naofumi had tried to lead this conversation with his recent discovery from the first season, but the idea that each of their unique leveling methods was fully valid and functional simply wasn't something the other heroes were willing to believe right now.
Right, okay.
Instead, it was just much easier to call Naofumi a cheater and a liar.
They're such idiots, man. They're such idiots.
That would make them even acknowledge him. The only point Naofumi was able to get across himself was that he actually wasn't as powerful as they believed him to be. You see, ever since Naofumi had demonstrated all those crazy abilities,
so sick.
The other heroes had come under the misconception that Naofumi could deal significant amounts of damage. What they failed to understand, though, was that the very act of attacking wasn't even possible for him.
Yeah, he can't wield any
there
weapons.
Were specific situations where his counters
Like he mentioned that in that first episode just now, and he says to what's her name, like, at least you can carry a weapon.
It was a point that was made clear when Naofumi had stood up and punched Motoyasu right in the face. Though Naofumi's fist had very clearly made an impact, the damage done was completely nullified. Not a bit of pain could be felt by Motoyasu during the punch or even after. So, with that little display getting the heroes to shut up for a bit, Naofumi did try to get his points across once again, but the ensuing back and forth only
They never listen.
an entertaining quarrel that highlighted just how stubborn the other heroes really could be. Then, just as the conversation was about to boil over into a fight, that's when the Queen stepped in to intervene and change the topic. If the other heroes really weren't yet open to trusting Naofumi, then perhaps they could discuss their new opponents instead. So, with the most memorable thing about them being their legendary-like weapons and abilities, the Queen decided it was best to share a legend that might be related to it.
Right.
A legend that spoke of the existence of 7 additional weapons.
Okay.
Just like how
cool.
there existed Naofumi and the other 3 heroes, there was also the potential for there to be 7 more of them. A group globally
And
known as
are they the people that's shown in the
each of which possesses
outro of the video? I was like, very much like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see these characters pop up. Right, okay.
Unlike how the main 4 have to be summoned in order to exist, the 7 stars can be pretty much anyone. Whether it's a person isekai from a different world, or even a normal adventurer who was born in this one, any and all can have the opportunity to become a wielder of
I love how he always uses fate weapons, man.
Now, normally a summoning process would be done to try and find the perfect hero, but in the event that that process does in fact fail, anyone with the ability to wield the weapon can try and do so. It's after they're then chosen to become the hero that the person who does typically becomes physically more powerful.
Right.
It's this whole appointment process that usually occurs whenever there's a time of conflict. So, considering that the waves are the greatest conflict of them all, you'd be right to assume that most of the 7-star heroes have already been appointed. One of which, unfortunately, doesn't include a Scythe. Of the ones that do exist here, though, There's the basic ones of
Scythe's
staff,
a cool
hammer,
one.
axe, claws, and gauntlets.
Claws and
then the more complex
gauntlets.
ones of whip and projectile weapons. The reason for the latter's very nondescript name is that the weapon itself can transform into any sort of throwable weapon.
Right.
Regardless of whether it's a kunai, throwing knife, or hatchet, the legendary projectile weapon can become all of them.
Cool.
Making it a ranged armament very similar to Itsuki's. As for the whip, well, although this may seem somewhat weak compared to all the others, it too can transform into different weapons like a chain or flail.
Oh, now that's cool.
It's also said
Yo.
to be able to control the power of monsters. So, despite these weapons not being one of
I want the whip.
relics,
I love the
their
whip.
broad variety definitely made Naofumi a little jealous. They certainly seemed to have quite a bit more flexibility than his shield did. Now, considering the usefulness of such legendary weapons, you're probably wondering where their holders are now. Well,
Don't know who they are, but they look
surprised
cool.
to know that only the Queen has met them. Just like how Naofumi and the others were holding off the waves of Melromark, so too were the 7-star heroes trying to do everywhere else. They were spread across the globe doing everything they could to mitigate the damage.
Right.
That said, because none of their weapons matched the descriptions of larks or glasses, the only conclusion everyone could come to was that they were in possession of their own. So, if their world did in fact have legendary weapons similar to their own, then the next question to ask would be how many. One did speak as if they were quite the common.
Yeah.
There was no way to truly tell if he was bluffing or not. In the off chance that he wasn't, though, that would mean the enemy could have entire armies filled with soldiers as strong as glass
Oh
ones.
God.
It was a thought that made the
Could you
Queen
imagine?
realize just how
That's gonna be
dire the
trouble.
situation really could be, leading her to suggest the heroes undergo some form of formal battle training. Of course, the idea didn't seem to bode well with the expected 3, but even they seemed to understand just how outmatched they were.
When she mentions going to get the fight against the tortoise, they're like, no, we got better things to do. Right now for me, it's like,
They just kinda grunted and moaned at the thought of doing something so mundane and boring. In any case, that was pretty much the gist of the meeting. A surprising fact about the world was suddenly revealed, and the idea of some formal battle training was finally introduced. There was a bit more to be said about the 7 heroes after, but that's something I'm sure we'll find out eventually. Now, before we go on to the next stuff involving Rishia, it's important to note that her scenes from episode 25 haven't technically happened yet. She hasn't yet made the attempt to drown herself, and as a result hasn't yet been invited to Naofumi's party.
oh,
Instead, what I'm about to talk about are the events leading up to that. So, it was right after this...
wow,
Queen
it has been
Naofumi
like moved all over the
Rishia
place.
while she was mid-airment,
Crazy.
clearly overloaded by whatever tasks Itsuki had been giving her. The reason she specifically was treated so poorly, though, was mainly due to the hierarchy system of Itsuki's party. You see, because she was the member who ranked at the very bottom, it was fairly common for everyone else to treat her like a slave.
That's so
So,
mean.
when Naofumi saw just how exhausted she looked, it was only natural that he offered to help, giving the two the opportunity to get to know each other.
Okay.
There wasn't much for Naofumi to say about himself, but for Rishia, this was where we'd learn about her backstory. Naofumi was rather adamant on finding out why she had decided to join up with Itsuki. This may be shown a little bit later, but in the off chance that it doesn't, I'll just briefly summarize.
Okay, cool.
Rishia had come from a noble family who'd driven themselves to ruin. They didn't have very much money,
Oh,
and
no.
whatever money they did get always went towards the defenses provided by the corrupt nobles of the neighboring village. When the time eventually came where her village couldn't afford to pay those defense fees, that's when it was decided that Rishia would be offered up instead.
Oh,
She
dear.
was taken by force and sent to the barbaric...
So like a slave, yeah.
A fate worse than death if not for the heroic intervention of Itsuki. As soon as he
Ah.
had found out that this was what was happening, he immediately led his party and saved Rishia from her captors, resulting in her eventual recruitment into
So
his
she
party.
feels like she owes him a lot.
This wasn't
Damn.
because Itsuki wanted her to, but instead because Rishia felt like she needed to. To her, Itsuki was this person that she owed everything to. He was her knight in shining armor that had come to rescue her. That being the case, it was only natural Rishia would want to do whatever she could to give a little bit back to him. She was determined to become useful to him no matter what it took. The main problem with that, though, was that Itsuki refused to use Rishia in a position where she could excel at. Despite her being quite skilled with magic, he instead decided to try and use her as a warrior. His search for frontline fighters forced her to place her stats into a melee build instead of a mage.
Oh, he messed her
leading to
about.
her current struggles as the weakest member of the party. Now, fast forward a little bit to the day after, and once again Naofumi would come across Rishia. This time seemingly distraught while having a conversation with the spear hero. Unlike how you're probably thinking, though, it wasn't Motiyasu who had caused her to be upset here. No, He was actually just trying to cheer her up.
Oh, bless.
The reasons for which both refused to elaborate on. It was only after confronting Motoyasu privately after that Naofumi would finally find out what had really happened. A turn of events that would lead to one of the most badass Naofumi scenes yet. So, as we found out in episode 25, Rishia had been kicked from Itsuki's party due to a crime she didn't commit.
Yeah.
She had supposedly broken one of Itsuki's favorite accessories, then tried to hide it. When Itsuki found out and went to confront her, it didn't matter how much she tried to deny it because the other party members all said that they saw her do it. Even as she
Why?
begged and cried,
Why
they
be
still
so
continued
rough?
to tell Itsuki that she was nothing more than a liar. So, given the similar nature of this situation to its own, it was only natural for Naofumi to burst into Itsuki's room and to demand some answers. Not because he wanted to prove Rishia's innocence, but instead because he had found out that Itsuki already knew about it. What I mean is that Itsuki had already been informed of Rishia's innocence. It wasn't long after the whole incident had occurred that one of the Queen's shadows would privately meet with him to tell him what really happened.
Oh.
They had given an unbiased report from a witness who had seen everything. An objective recount of the truth that should have been used to clear Rishia's name. But even after this statement was given, Itsuki still refused to revert his decision. He would continue to believe his party over the words of the shadow, leaving Naofumi with no other choice but to confront Itsuki directly now. So, moments after barging into his room, a single question was all it took for Naofumi to deduce Itsuki's true intentions. He had come to realize that all this was nothing more than a plot derived from jealousy. As for where that jealousy had come from, well, that brings us back to when the heroes were meeting with the Queen.
Okay.
You see, Itsuki couldn't stand the fact that Rishia was receiving praise instead of him. He couldn't bear having the weakest member of his party be the one to gain all the glory.
What a
So,
prick.
rather than do literally anything that would help to improve himself, Itsuki instead chose to deal with the problem by simply getting rid of it. He had ordered his party members to destroy the bracelet, then use them to testify against Rishia so that he could justify getting rid of her. It was the only way Itsuki felt that he could...
What an asshole!
As soon as Naofumi provided the proof that Rishia was innocent, though, that's when Itsuki began to frame the story a different way. He began to say how they'd set everything up in order to help her, that the whole incident was just a means of keeping her away from the battlefield. Of course, that was just a story they'd made up right there on the spot, but it was the only one they could say without having to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So, it was right there that Itsuki would refuse Rishia for good. He would tell her in no uncertain terms that she was simply far too weak for them. Now, the moment Naofumi saw just how little Itsuki cared for the thoughts and feelings of others was the moment he realized he wasn't even worth being angry over. Before, he was just about ready to bring out the Shield of Wrath and fight everyone.
Oof. I love that Wrath Shield, man. It's just like, it's so
Naofumi's boiling
cool.
rage was slowly turning to indifference. He was becoming fed up to the point where he just didn't care anymore. Regardless of whether he was supposed to
Look at that, man. That's so
or not,
cool.
there wasn't a single fuck for Naofumi to give anymore.
Yo!
Which is honestly the best way I can describe just how disappointed he was.
Yeah.
So, rather than waste any more energy getting angry, Naofumi simply spoke to Itsuki as if he was a child. He made sure to
Nice.
let him know exactly how much his opinion...
Well, I thought you had a sense of justice. I thought you had some issues, but you got at least be a decent hero.
wasn't something he was
And
willing
now
to
this,
let go
I suppose,
unpunished.
surprise and
Not
disappointing
only
you.
was he
Yeah.
raising his voice to the level of a screaming rage now, but he had also started to reach for his bow as if to attack. In action, Naofumi actually encouraged since he knew it wouldn't do anything anyway.
Ooh, yeah, it's like, come on then.
Right after Naofumi had called him a coward, it was only a moment later that Itsuki would unleash a barrage of arrows straight towards him. A series of attacks that did absolutely nothing to stop or even slow Naofumi from approaching.
Amazing.
Even after trying one of his defense-piercing skills,
Whoa.
Naofumi still didn't raise his shield since his attacks weren't even worth defending against. Instead, he braced himself and caught the skill right out of the air.
That's sick. Oh, why did they leave this out?
His life had dissipated. Then, once Naofumi had backed Itsuki into a corner, the only thing he could do was mock whatever measly strength Itsuki considered to be his own. He had made sure to let Itsuki know just how weak he really was.
Whoa.
As someone who had just ridiculed Rishia for being too weak herself, it was
That's
quite satisfying
sick.
to see that same treatment being served back immediately after, making for what's honestly one of my favorite moments in Shield Hero.
That
as
is
a whole.
sick. Whoa.
It's a shame we didn't get to see all this.
It
in the
really
anime,
is,
but
man.
That was the context behind why Rishia had tried to drown herself here, leading us to her eventual addition into Naofumi's party. Now,
Right.
since all this technically happened way back in Season 1, you're probably wondering where that brings us to now. Well, it wasn't long after Rishia had joined the party that Naofumi would bring up the suggestion of her becoming a slave.
Oh, and they changed
The
that.
reason the idea had even come up in the first first place was because both Keel and Rishia seemed dedicated to becoming the strongest that they could. And yeah, Keel was there with Rishia as well. Unlike how we saw in the anime, he had actually managed to join Naofumi's party too.
Oh.
So, if both him and Rishia were truly serious about getting stronger, then Naofumi knew the easiest way to do it was for both of them to become his slaves. Reason being that there were two key skills which made his slaves far more powerful. The first was maturation adjustment, which made any bit of growth significantly more efficient. Then the second was ability adjustment, which helped them master their abilities incredibly faster. If the two were willing to become his slaves, then both those skills would allow them to level up far faster.
Wow, they've changed quite a lot here, haven't they? Damn.
Very hesitant to make, but ultimately accepted after some reassuring words from Raptalia. Now, an interesting thing to note about how these slave crests work is that a checklist of restrictions needs to be applied for the seal to become active. It was basically a list of actions the slave would or wouldn't be able to do. Of course, Naofumi had tried to uncheck them all, but at least one was needed in order for the spell to work. So, the single restriction Naofumi decided to place on them was the inability to lie whenever talking to him. A simple measure that basically ensured they'd never be able to betray him. Where that brings us to now is an entire arc of training that the anime decided to completely ignore.
So weird.
5 whole chapters of content involving a Clara and her attempt to make the hero stronger. I can't say for certain whether this is something they'll come back to or not, but it seems like Season 2 had started right after their training had finished. So, if this does look like something that won't be
so weird,
then perhaps I'll come back to it in a couple weeks.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Just be sure, because you don't want to be giving away spoilers for stuff we're actually going to see. I see why he's done that. It's cool.
Once the other heroes had realized just how hard the training actually was, though, they decided to try and skip on it by leaving the country. A turn of events that marks the beginning of the Spirit Eternal arc. It's hard to say what's going to be cut and what isn't right now. So, I think it's best to call it here and wait for episode 2. Now, if you enjoyed what you've been seeing
cool,
so far,
that was
then
very
be sure to
cool.
subscribe
I like
since there'll be
that.
plenty more to see next week. And feel free to leave a like and comment since it really does help the video to do better. Now, before I go, I'd like to thank Lord of Heroes once again for sponsoring this video. If you've been looking for a strategic anime-styled RPG, then I highly recommend using the link in the description to try this one out. It's free and it actually goes a long way in supporting the channel. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. Love it. Yes, we're definitely going to be checking these out. That was really, really interesting. Like, whoa. They cut 5 chapters out of training. Like, what? That's absolutely insane. And the way they've like rearranged stuff is just absolutely bizarre as well. I love it. Like, I was recommending one of my friends at work to check these out for the Overlord ones. So yeah, I think every week we'll be checking these cut content videos out. Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video, link is in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month helps support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.